Zoom. Lynwen, I love that you compared ILM to kind of a working brain and how you guys are always thinking, creating, and innovating. Is there anything you could kind of say about what you guys are working on now? Because it seems like it's always those things where we know about the volume. You guys probably have so much in the works that we don't even know of yet.
Well, LucasFilm alone keeps ILM very, very busy, and then of course we continue to work for the Disney and Marvel projects as well as other studios. So we have like 20 more projects going on at one time at ILM. So, and every single one of them is always doing something new. Every single one of them starts with that head scratch moment of, we're going to do this. And I think that's what's so energizing about working in visual effects, but particularly about working within ILM, because we get more of those kind of projects, and just all of the folks who work there have that mindset. I mean, I'm so in love with this company. It's just one of those things that really does get me up.
I love that. I love that. Yes, first, and we'll figure it out, and we always get it done. Ron, the love for Solo was palpable in that room. I'm just curious what that felt like, and also what it felt like to kind of return home to work with ILM again when you worked on Solo.
Well, returning with ILM is, of course, great. Right? Rob Bredout's fantastic, but then I have a lot of confidence in any relationship with ILM, and also with special effects. Although it was exciting to see that some of the breakthrough ideas in sort of technology were beginning to present themselves.
They started on Solo.
And they did start on Solo, and so that was fun to see and to apply and be a part of. Also, it was for me coming in when I did, everything was suddenly a very tight schedule, and I was beginning to approve pre-designed effect shots as finalists. Even while we were shooting, and so there was a lot of trust there. It was just great to have that trust in that collaboration. And as far as the sort of love for Solo, of course, it's incredibly gratifying, and it means a lot to the cast. A great young cast who put their heart and soul into the movie, and so it means the world that somehow the film resonates with Star Wars fans. That's all everybody hopes for.
Yeah. You mentioned one of the innovations that ILM was doing on Solo. Do you have an example?
Well, it was sort of the beginning of the volume. We had a version of that for the Millennium Falcon cockpit.
Yeah, we had. It wasn't a 360 volume, but we had LED screens, and for the jump into hyperspace, we had that generated on the screen, so we got lots of shots in camera, which I think is the key to stagecraft. The fact that you can put your actors in real virtual world, so they're not reacting to a blue screen outside the cockpit window. They have that exhilaration of that moment, and then now with the entire volume, they really feel that they're on different planets, and they can react in a way that is harder to do when you're in a sea of green. And I think that's the most important thing. It's a incredibly innovative technology, but it allows a story to be told in a more authentic way, I think. And we've definitely started that. I'm Ron being up for saying, sure, give it a go.
Well, it was immediately, it did definitely solve a problem, because you didn't have to talk the actor through the scene, and now you're shifting into this kind of section of space, or it was there for them. And and again, that's just an example of ILM and problem solving in general, which is, how do we tell the story better? Well, when the actors are more connected, that's a great leap. And so it's not all about efficiency, and it's not even about creating new worlds or universes. It's also just about creating something very imaginative that actors can connect with. Therefore, the characters convey a level of honesty, and it only helps create the illusion for the audience in a more vivid way.
You guys somehow bring the volume to Celebration. We all want to go in. Joe, for you, you had a really great working relationship with Ralph McQuarrie that I would love to hear a little more about. Can you tell us about the back and forth that you two had and kind of problem solving and getting things to a point where George was happy?
Well, Ralph and I.
Yeah.
Ralph and I recognized right away that we were two different kinds of artists. Ralph was an illustrator first and a designer second, and I was a designer first and an illustrator second. And I knew I was never going to be able to render an image the way Ralph did, because I think he's one of the greatest illustrators who ever worked in this or any other business. But we recognized that we had this relationship that could feed off of each other. So Ralph always let me have the final word on what the design was. And he would take sometimes my drawings, my designs, and sketch them up and send them back to me. And I would change them. You know, it was a really symbiotic relationship where we would just sort of feed off each other's ideas. And I've never worked with anyone else in the same way, and I doubt that I ever will, since I don't draw anymore. But it was just a great relationship, you know, and we didn't plan it to be that way. That's just sort of the way it worked, you know, just this very organic trading of ideas.
That's awesome. Phil, for you, people really got a kick out of the Admiral Akbar Mon Calamari naming story in the panel. I was curious if there are any other creatures that you guys had a really great time naming or anything similar that happened like that.
Yeah, Disney will love this.
Yes.
Let's see. Tony McVeigh, George wanted Jabba to have a little tap. And so Tony McVeigh designed this thing. And Tim, I forget his last name, the puppeteer, he was one of the Henson guys, puppeted it. And we'd gone out to a Mexican restaurant for lunch. And we had quite a few beers. And my tennis shoes had become undone. And I bent over and I was trying to tie them, and it was like, doing a knot. And I said, something like, my shoelaces can't. It was like, that's the name of the character. and so we told George, and that turned into Salacious Art Pro.
Now, Dennis, you also worked on E.T., which turns 40 next month. I'm curious if you have any stories I'm curious if you have any standout memories of working on that film.
You know, for Island, it was a small little show. A couple of other big shows were going on. We were literally in the corner of the big warehouse we were in, with not much space. Everything was done at a small scale. We made miniature trees for the forest. When the ship is landing, or the bikes are landing and all, normally we'd make trees 3 or 4 feet high. We had to make them like half the height, and they still had to look real. So a lot of constraints on that end. But the spirit of the movie came through when Stephen was directing it. I was on the set quite a bit. So it was just fun and serious, but very fun and magical. And I think that carried through, to us working on it, from these constraints to be able to do it. And I try to keep the spirit of fun and adventure as opposed to much fear and dread. So that even during those kind of scary landing sequences, there was a little bit of, am I going to be able to land right? Oh, I corrected the bike or something like that. So anyway, and we made a couple of small ETs also for it that were kind of neat. One of them is looking out over the valley, you see ET in the foreground. It's kind of his point of view. It was all done inside, little map painting and things. So there's, I don't know, probably 40 or 50 little shots like that. But what a surprise it became a huge film. I remember seeing it in a cast of crew screening and coming out, I'd seen an early version of it at Stephen's house without sound, temporary music, and I didn't get it at all. Because you could hear the mechanical parts of the mechanical ET moving. You hear turn this up like that. And then I thought, well, I hope this is going to work. I don't know. And then when I saw the screening of it, I came out thinking, there's no one that will not love this movie. And my mother saw it just afterwards, and she said, this guy could shoot the phone book. They used to have phone books. Give him anything, and he'll make an emotional, positive movie out of it. And so true.
Rose, I'm sure being a part of Light and Magic has dredged up a lot of great memories, but one I know that is really cherished to you is the daycare. Could you tell us a little more about that?
Thank you for asking. I think I closed my panel remarks about how much George Lucas cares about children. And when I had my first child, he said, well, I hope not to see you around here for 5 years. And I'm like, well, yeah, but I have to make a living. He gave me a book about self-esteem for children. He's really into families. He thinks that having a family is super important. So when I had a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I'm like 9 months pregnant, and I went in front of a company meeting, I was pitching daycare for LucasFilm. And so I stand in front of the crowd, big crowd like this, but like bigger, and I said, I want to have your babies. And you can't get away with that today, but no one signed up that day except for me, but the company went ahead and started daycare, and Lynwen can attest to this. Her own son went there. It is still, I think it was booked a month after we opened, and really I give credit to Genevieve Tan and Larry's wife, Genevieve, you all remember her. They started at Muren Day, and they built this beautiful daycare center, and because you know that if people are happy where their children are, if their children are happy, they're going to stay. You can offer them 50% more money and they're not going to leave. And so our president at the time, Doug Norby from Fairchild, knew that, and George knew that. And they approved this expenditure, even though it was just for my 3 children.
I really thank you for that, Rose, because yes, as you said, I got to benefit. Now our daycare is on site. So there's a wonderful family feeling there. Everybody's there with their kids, and we're all having lunch with our kids. Mine's gone out of daycare now, but there is something really special about that. And I remember I was promoted to president when I was on maternity leave, which just goes to show that idea of it's a family affair. So thank you for doing that.
It's my legacy, it's my honor. But truthfully, it's about the young people. I mean, we were all super young on Star Wars 47 years ago. We were all in our 20s. I don't think anyone was 30. Maybe George?
George was 31.
George was 31. Okay, he was old. We're so young, and I think that's part of the fun. Not having the kids, not having to rush home to dinner and baths. But I think, at ILM, that's part of what is retained. They keep hiring young people. And surely you need, the sophisticated leadership, but you also need that new blood. So we're all looking for new blood. I'm doing that on behalf of Visual Effects Society, and looking to outreach to schools. We need a whole new generation of effects workers because it's huge. The industry has exploded.
More meat for the grinder.
More meat for the grinder. Oh, you're so cynical.
I would add to that the VS is doing a lot of great work. We just launched a Get in the Door website as well, and the idea there is to reach out to people that are not in the industry and realize that I think that there is this sense of if you're not a computer graphics whiz or that there's no place for you in visual effects, but actually we have fine artists, we have sculptors, yes, we have some actual rocket scientists and computer graphics whizzes, but we also have fashion designers, and it doesn't matter what your talent is, there is a place for you in the visual effects business. And that's what I love about it. There's so many different kinds of talent, so many different kinds of characters, and there is a home for you. And I think that there is this sense that this is this magical box that you have to be invited into, but we thrive on having lots of different kinds of people, lots of different backgrounds, lots of different talents. So yeah.
That's wonderful. Why don't we take some questions from the press? If you have a question, just raise your hand. We have a microphone to go around, and we have one right here. And just say name, outlet, and who your question's for.
Hi, my name is Lupe. I'm with Cinemovie. I wanted to ask, how has 3D printing affected? Because before you had to hand sculpt figures, but now you can just print them out. So
Yeah, it's been huge. You know, for a lot of the stuff now, I mean, if you're doing like practical stuff, you can 3D print out negative molds, you know, and if you're doing like, we're doing a bunch of stop motion stuff for, you know, Mandalorian, printing out the 3D articulated skeletons for stuff, and, you know, doing, you know, like lifelike figurines where you don't have to actually do like Harrison Ford face and trying to like figure out how it all went together. You just like bam. I mean, it just goes up the chain like that. So it's really significant and becoming even more so.
And let me just add to that, what Phil said earlier is important, even for concept. You know, you can do concept art in 2D, you can do 2D on a computer screen or whatever, but then just take it the next step and print it out as a concept. And everybody learns so much more from being able to hold it up and look at it and seeing it in different lights and everything. It's really valuable.
All right. See you right here. Yep.
Hello. I was just wondering, I'm Mari Glons from Norway, and nice to meet you all. I was wondering if you have any qualms about showing the audience how the sausage is made, so to speak, and why did you want to tell this story?
Well, imagine Entertainment, you know, produced the film, you know, along with Lucasfilm, and when I was talking to Larry Kasdan about the idea, and then involved Justin Wilkes, you know, who runs the documentary group for Imagine, there was so much excitement about it, and J.J. Abrams has a quote where he says, "It's the one thing where you can see behind the trick." And it's even more fascinating, and so Larry's point, and the thing he was so passionate about, was putting the faces to the act of creation, understanding the heartbeat of that kind of you know, the sort of genesis of an art form in a way, or evolution of an art form, and so I think there's just a kind of a recognition that there's already so much fascination for it, that it's okay, and if the magic works the way it so often does, and by the time it's finished and through the post-production editorial process and the sound and everything, that you don't have to know, you know, that you don't have to believe it's real. It just becomes it. And sweeps you up and carries you away, and that you know, and that if you love films and cinema, that understanding the heartbeat of it and of the process is rewarding and additive.
I also think what Ron and Larry have done so beautifully here is it's not about how the sausage is made, it's who's making the sausage. So right here, in front.
She's coming. Sorry, making you run around.
Hi, Eman or Emmanuel from Eman's Movie Reviews and the Movie Blog in Chicago. So 3D printing, deep fakes, technology is obviously moving forward. Is there any technology that's currently, you know, spurring new ideas that have you guys fascinated and, you know, just inspiring you to do something better and cooler?
Genetic engineering.
I would say that a lot of AI technologies, you know, figuring out how we can automate and really get get more natural reactions from characters that we make, and on stagecraft, for example, when we use our real-time technology to populate the scenes, there are happy accidents that happen when we're using that technology, because it is running, and it's running live, and just like in real practical filmmaking, there's things that you can't plan that happen on stagecraft that are just naturally generated through the real-time set. That's what I love. It's finding that new new way to do things that are actually repeating traditional techniques, but there are things that you can't plan. That's what I'm really excited about right now.
And I'd like to add to that it's been proven now that anything you want to put on a screen is possible to capture, but that doesn't mean that you should. I mean, visual effects, no matter how they're made, even if you go back to the days of building a model and shooting it against a blue screen, it's a tool for telling a story. And personally, I don't like it when somebody comes out of the theater and says, "Wow, what great special effects!" Because that, to me, that means you weren't fully engaged in the story that some director is trying to tell. So they should. I believe that effects should be used sparingly, and there shouldn't be one more effect in a film that you don't actually need. It should be about telling the story, as at the bottom of it all.
Let me just add one thing. I think that we need to do a little more investigation as to what reality is visually, because I think a lot of the effects work is falling short. And if it just can notch up a little more, it'll be more real. And to go with what Joe's saying, then you're more into the movie. Not that everything has to just look real, but if you're trying to make something like in a familiar environment like that, the closer that gets, so then you can add your fantasy. But when you're real, then the experience will be stronger and the emotional reaction will be stronger.
I have a different take on that, and I never really aspired to real, and maybe because a lot of it was because you can never achieve that. It's only going to be a simulation. So to use the imaginative process and be theatrical and make things hyper real, because you're in a dream. You're in a cinematic dream, and to make things just hold them from another dimension of imagination and put them in this thing, so that you trick the viewer's mind in a way. It is real in their mind because it is new, but it's not like real. And so reality is a very mercurial thing I think that, I don't know, would you agree with that in designing things? That you're not trying to make something real, but you're trying to make something like, wow!
Well, you're trying to make something feel real. You're trying to make something that, everybody knows it's not real. Everybody knows that this spaceship is not flying. But if you're engaged in the story, you forget all that. And that's why I don't think it matters if the entire audience knows how a visual effect is done. You're engaged in the story, and you're going to forget about all that, about how it's engaged in what the director's trying to tell you.
About 8 or 9 years ago, I remember reading an interview that Bob Zemeckis gave. And Bob's so visually progressive, always thinking, creative collaborator, and always pushing the medium. And he said, we've reached a point with digital effects where most serious audience members who really love, cinema, they know that anything is possible. So you no longer can a film carry its weight by simply dazzling you. And he said, this is a call to action for directors and storytellers and writers, because now it's back to story. There was a little window of time when you could just, show them stuff that they'd never seen before, and that was, almost enough reason to be in the theater. Not anymore. And I think that's I think it's a great thing. I think that was concise and clear and correct, and I think it does all come back to, you know, what does a story have to say?
Keep this party going. See over there.
Rachel Leishman from the Marysville. So what's really interesting is you guys have all been here at LIM from the start, and so now there's a new generation of directors like Bryce Dallas Howard, who's being kind of hailed as the best of this franchise in a way. So how does that feel, getting to see who comes into the franchise now and kind of takes over at ILM and bringing these stories to life?
Don't ask me.
I would love to take that one. You know, it is, it's a joy to work with new people all the time, particularly people like Bryce and like Deb Trow, and people who come in with new approaches, new perspectives, and when we're filming on a stagecraft volume, for example, that is something that is a very different way of filmmaking, and seeing the enthusiasm that people embrace, such a different way of filmmaking, and then add to it. That's what I always find so gratifying about the series space, because we get to work with more directors in the series, in the episodic space, and they each bring a different perspective and make it better every single time, and that is what is so wonderful. And Bryce is a perfect example of that.
Does anybody not know what stagecraft volume is? Raise your hand if you don't know. Oh, you all good at 8. Well, I'll tell you afterwards.
You know, Martin Scorsese once said, if you want to know the future of filmmaking, go visit George Lucas and Industrial Light and Magic, which I thought was such a compliment. But I think this series is all about that, because George Lucas set out to revolutionize the process of filmmaking, and that has been done. It's digital. You can do anything. Not that you should.
Yeah. Just piggybacking off what Rachel said about Bryce, Ron, when you saw her first episode of The Mandalorian that she directed, how did you react? How did you feel?
Well, I was happy for her, because clearly it worked. Her bosses were happy with her. I got a little wink and a nod from Jon Favreau and a little text, hey, she did great, which made me feel good. She'd been directing for a while, and I'd seen her directing, you know, when she was an acting major at NYU. She was already directing plays as well, and so I've known it's something that she's really wanted to do. So I've got to say, you know, she never surprises me when she succeeds, I felt comfortable with her getting into the business at a certain point when she was in high school, and I could see her ambition for it was for the work. It was for the process, and she loves what's happening, you know, in getting to work with John and Dave and you know and everyone at Lucasfilm. She's learning a lot. She's growing a lot, and she can feel it. And she also loves the fact that you know it's a show that it has ideas, but it really is for the fans. It really is to try to connect with the audience, and that there's a clear cut. There's a respect for that audience, that gives her something to kind of understand and aim for, that she feels that she likes.
She's so kind and so passionate, and I think we all want her to take on Star Wars movies a bit. All right, who else? You right here?
Hi, I'm Josephine from Greece, 24 Media. I was wondering about those early days, the relationship between the studio and the company, because there was a refrigerator incident you mentioned, and John Dicecraft has mentioned a lot about hot tub incidents. So I'm wondering, how did
that whole thing?
The studio was not happy with George Lucas and the budget. The studio canceled production of Star Wars early on. George Lucas spent his own money to keep ILM going. The studio hated it. They didn't understand it. They didn't like American Graffiti. That was a different studio, probably. But, George was coming from a different place. And look at American Graffiti. It's like, least amount of money spent, most amount of money made. But on Star Wars, they wanted to they cut the budget late in the production. So George felt he only got 25% of what he wanted, both live action and visual effects. So it was a constant battle. And it set in motion that George financed his own movies. I think the studio financed Empire, correct? But by Jedi, he was financing his own movies. And he dropped out of the DGA and the Writers Guild. No, it was not a happy marriage.
I got Fox to do work for me, so it was very happy. When we were working on the Cantina scene, we had set up in this, it wasn't more than 1,000-foot square room that shared in an industrial space that shared a sheetrock wall with another space of identical size. And on that side, there was a rock band that did Queen covers. And they practiced during the day, and the wall was essentially like an amplifier. And there was like all this noise, and there was no way you could dumb it out. And, they'd go to this guy who was wearing like baubles and long hair with high heeled shoes and everything, and he'd sing and say, "Hey man, can you like put down a little bit?" He's like, "Yeah, fuck you." And so, we told George, and George brought a studio rep over, and the studio rep went, "Oh yeah, okay, let me see what I can do about that." And so he called up the group's manager and said, if you don't want this group to be destroyed, have them stop practicing during the day. And that worked.
Excellent. Well, George and 20th Century Fox got along great after Star Wars was released because it made so much money for everybody. And Alan Ladd Jr. was the hero here. He's the solo guy, I think he was on the board, who kept the movie alive and kept believing in the movie and believing in George. Thank you, Alan Ladd Jr., for allowing Star Wars to be made.
And of course, you want to know this is still going on. The story has not changed at all. Studios will reject films. I think it's the worst thing that's ever done. Not going to do it. We'll start it out. We're going to shut it down. Recently, one of my favorite films has been La La Land. I don't know where that came from. Same story on that movie because it's so odd. What kind of thing is this? You got to take chances on these people and believe in the filmmaker. Trust them, because you don't know everything.
And you get to this point now, like with Francis Coppola, he just went like, fuck all that shit, I'm not dealing with that anymore. I've been through it too many times, so I'm going to sell off a bunch of vineyards and property and whatnot. And I'm going to spend $120 million of my own money to make a movie I wanted to make for, 30 years. So, lucky him.
Who is next? See right here?
You create a creature or something.
If I regret?
Any regrets about like a design of a creature?
Yeah.
Any regrets of the
So
design
you're
of being here?
Let's give it out. Yes.
No. No, I mean, so few people were doing this stuff. It never came in terms of regret. I mean, in terms of Jabba the Hutt, though I never.
What does he feel like?
That's not true. I actually did feel Jabba the Hutt in this way. So Joe and Ralph and I were all contributing designs to Jabba the Hutt, and it was like George wasn't in, not that, not that, not that, and we were all just, I don't know how many weeks it took, but it went on for a while, and so I had done like 3 maquettes, and the first one looked like Nick the Merciless, kind of George said, nah, don't do that. And the second one, George said, that's too horrible. And so we were all at this loggerhead, and I asked him kind of like, well, what, or shook down somehow, what actor would you choose to play Jabba the Hutt? And he said, Sidney Greenstreet. You know who Sidney Greenstreet is? Anybody go to the movies?
Zero.
Holy shit. You know who Michael Jackson is? Well, there's nothing like Michael Jackson. Anyway, you should go Casablanca. Anybody seen Casablanca?
Yeah.
You know the big fat guy? I don't know. So my story lacks any punch, you know. So he said, make it, yeah, and then I got it, and it was like, whatever, okay.